What's a low-effort job with a surprisingly high salary? Story 1. I do admin work for the government. My pay is $55K. At best I get 5 emails a day with about 2 that actually concern me. No BS. My phone has rang about 20 times since June 1st. On a super busy day, I have about 45 minutes worth of work to do. Story 2. IT manager at a university. The techs know their jobs, their users, and manage their own schedules and workloads among themselves. Managers basically just have to rubber stamp time cards, confirm parts orders, and make sure the techs don't all take vacations at the same time. Story 3. I worked as a massage model at a massage school. My job was to lay there and be massaged for a few hours while the students did their lessons or took their exams. It was $30 an hour, which isn't loads, but better than the $10 an hour office job I had before. Edit: just to clarify, this wasn't a full-time job. It was fairly casual, probably between 4 and 10 hours a week depending on how busy the school was that week, and only for maybe 3 or 4 months. Story 4. Over the course of my many careers, I can confidently say that there's an inverse relationship between how taxing my work has been and how much I've gotten paid. The most gut-wrenching, physical and emotionally intensive labor was lowest paying. The highest paying was chilling out on some meetings and making comments every now and then on spreadsheets. Story 5. I have some relatives that work for the US federal government that often talk about jobs where they work in areas like accounting and project management that make over $100,000 and might on a busy day have as much as 2 hours of actual work. My aunt was talking about this one older woman near retirement that made over $120,000 a year, and her only job was running some transactions every morning, which usually took no more than 20 minutes. Then she would spend the rest of the day knitting at her desk. Story 6. My next-door neighbor works in a power station. His job is to sit in front of a monitor and make sure everything is working well. If something goes wrong, he calls the appropriate workstation and they fix the problem. Because an alarm sounds if something is out of sync, which rarely happens, he is able to play games or read a book 99 of the time. He is on 150 per hour to basically play games and chill at work. Story 7. My current job, project manager for US-based Fortune 200 company, permanent work from home, makes 6 figures, and I do maybe 4 hours of actual work each week. I have my home office set up where I have 2 gaming monitors connected to my gaming laptop sitting on my desk directly in front of me. Then I have my work laptop sitting to one side that's got the volume turned up so I hear if I get an email or message. When I do, I handle that, then go back to my personal laptop. Most days I'm either playing video games, watching movies, browsing Reddit, studying for new certifications, or doing stuff around the house like laundry, dishes, cleaning rooms, food prep, etc. People on my team constantly say things like, "Man, this workload is insane. I've got the same and even more than some. It's so boring." But they're paying me to around most days. Story 8. In Australia, lollipop ladies can earn up to $3K per week for flipping a slow stop sign for traffic at roadside construction site and just generally existing as eye candy. The boredom, overtime and risk of death injury kind of makes up for it. Story 9. International pilot. I make $200K a year as a wide-body first officer. None of the decisions fall to me. I fly one leg to Europe. I get a couple-hour nap on each leg. I get 24 to 48 hours in a cool city. Then I fly one leg home, couple-hour nap again on the way home. When I'm home there is nothing I could conceivably do for work, so I just get to enjoy my many days off. Don't get me wrong, the training was intense. But man, my job now is stupid easy. Story 10. I had a job like this. I got paid $28 an hour working as an administrative assistant in a high school. It takes like 15 minutes to input grades and send truancy letters. Answering phone calls always resorts to just transferring them to the principal or school nurse. Literally nothing to do. I left the job because there's no work and the summer school is closed, and honestly, the environment was toxic. When you have that much free time at work, people want to start talking about their personal lives, and I don't like to talk about mine to my toxic coworkers. So I left. This job was the definition of money doesn't buy happiness. Story 11. This whole thread just goes to show, if all the employers were less obsessed with people looking busy and more concerned with getting done, would all be home by 3 p.m. and making decent money. Story 12. Business intelligence data analyst. Do you know how to use Excel? Can you write basically SQL? Are you able to express yourself clearly and deal with getting variations of the same 10 questions for the rest of your career? Congrats, welcome to making 100K. Story 13. School board members. Don't know about other places, but school board members at my school, public school, made well over €5,000 a month, well above the average. All the board ever did was create shitty rules and then remove them. They always acted so busy when everyone knew they drank coffee while surfing Facebook the entire day. A school member's husband even said that, so you know it's true. Story 14. Call center management. Not even something high up like operations or quality assurance. Even being middle management can be lucrative. I've worked a few call center jobs. The people on the bottom absolutely get overworked, stressed out, but once you get to management it's easy. Last call center job I worked, I got promoted to management just due to how long I had been there. After the promotion, I was paid $50K per year to sit at home, listen to people do their job, fill out paperwork and have the occasional web meeting. I spent more time playing video games and working out than anything else while on the clock. Funniest part to me is that when I gave my notice, they tried to offer me a promotion to stay because I was such a hard worker. I was super tempted to laugh and tell them how little work I actually did in a day. Story 15. As a facilities manager, I don't do a lot of work and I get a decent pay, but I am not paid for the work. I am paid for the safety and responsibility of the building and the lives within it. Story 16. If you can land it, but very difficult architectural 3D modeler and render guy. Usually firms hire out the work or they have interns do it. Some firms never have this set up, so I become that guy, make around 90K in LA. Usually I model buildings in 3D texture, then render. It's fun and no one bugs you. I have everything sort of automated except for the building part. I give them around a week so I can get the renders out. Story 17. I'm surprised no one said exotic dancer. I was a dancer in New York for 10 years. I didn't make a salary. I worked for tips before disgusting lap dances and pulled in over a couple of thousand a week, just dancing my off pretty effortless. And I get a great workout as well. Story 18. Cop. Where I am from they make 100,000 annually with very little crime. Money is divested into new toys, like helicopters, tanks, even robots. South Central LA, it is not. Story 19. Believe it or not, jobs usually pay what they do for a reason. You might be able to point out a particular instance of somebody having very little work to do and still drawing a high salary, but there is a reason that the role itself pays that sort of salary, regardless of the workload of any individual within that role. Further, effort is not the only determining factor for salary. Digging ditches takes an incredible amount of physical effort, but makes far less than most white-collar jobs. Most of the high-salary jobs that you can point to as being low effort are going to have their own drawbacks or requirements that drive the salary up so high. Usually, this takes the form of rare knowledge or ultimate responsibility for making calls and living or dying by how correct those calls are. So, you could find yourself in a low-effort job, making a high salary, but still sweating every day from the stress of wondering if you made a bad call and might lose it all. Story 20. Any job I have is low effort at it. I'm a commissioning engineer for power stations, by the way. Pays good and I spend a lot of time waiting for things to warm up or cool down while I drink tea. Story 21. Fractionation operator. Only HS degree. I have made over 6 figures the last 3 years. I have subscriptions to every streaming service BC. Basically all I do at work is watch series and movies, especially on midnights. Sometimes we get busy, but for the most part it's super boring and just chilling out. We have a turnaround next week that will last 2 weeks and we will have to do actual work, which will, but other than that it's just browsing the internet and watching Netflix. Story 22. Staffing and recruiting, but specifically on the business development or sales side of things. I don't even make sales calls much anymore, it's just repeat clients. They call me up and say, hey, we need a quality manager ASAP. I say cool, what does it pay and what are the top 3 things you need to see on a resume? I get that and then give it to recruiters who spend a week or 2 finding the right person and walking them through the hiring process. I spend 15 minutes on the phone and a month later I get a fat commission check. Edit. It's easy now, building a book of business and learning enough about every type of position that exists at every industry to the point where you know what you are talking about and people will trust you is hard. Story 23. Tour guiding. I'm a water tour guide in Hawaii. I make 4 times what the average person my age makes. Half the time I'm chillin' in the water or on the boat. The other half I'm a lifeguard, information dude, and boat flight attendant. Oh, thank you tourists. Story 24. Truck driver. Seriously, look into it. There is a huge demand for truck drivers right now, and I'm not talking the Amazon delivery guys. You can even get a local route and work regular work hours and make a lot of money for having the skill of driving. Story 25. Some kinds of writer. 99. 9 of novelists, poets and playwrights make sucky money. People who do technical writing earn more, but not enough given the time and expertise needed, but it's also possible to out-content in certain fields. I'm looking at you, health and fitness, self-development and positive psychology, at 100 per hour. No specialist knowledge, originality or talent required. Story 26. Radiological control technician. 85K base 100K if you work 1 weekend a month and plenty earn 150K. I'm making 45 an hour right now browsing Reddit and all I have for work today is 1 hour of tours. That's my workload, doesn't really change. Story 27. Depends on where you live, but in my neck of the woods, firefighters get paid 6 figures and spend most of their time chilling. Of course, when you're called to work, you really got to work, and you don't get to just leave work to go home when your shift is over when goes down. Story 28. Software engineer. I solved someone else's problem today since I had worked on a similar thing before, felt pretty accomplished and decided to stop working for the day. This was at 10 a.m. Story 29. An old pal of mine delivers expensive boats to customers by simply sailing them from where they were purchased to where the new owner wants. That's not really a job, is it? So whatever he makes is surprisingly high. Story 30. I think this thread is missing the mark in some of the responses, because people are still looking at it through the lens of how much effort or time it takes to do your job, and then these crazy salaries. One of the reasons that some of the salaries are high is because of the value these people have to the business or the government. So for example, for the person who has a special skill that only has been working for 25 minutes a day, and watching movies for the rest, just wait until that special skill is needed in an emergency. Usually that alone justifies the cost of having them sitting there all day. Story 31. Solar sales. Just have a few conversations with homeowners, go over proposals for them and then sign like 3 pieces of paperwork. Our project management team takes care of most of the work after that. Easily make about 2K a sale, made 11 sales last month and it's my second month in the industry, already on track to easily make 120K this year. I have an English degree, life is good. I also love this job because I'm actually helping people save thousands of dollars and the environment. The industry is booming and I give it a decade before almost half American homes are solar powered. We're in about 40 states too, so if you're interested in going solar for your home, shoot me a message. Story 32. I'm a funeral director. I get more than 50K a year before taxes, and all I do is stand at the door and greet people, and occasionally show them where the bathroom is. Story 33. Reading these just pisses me off about being in food service 13 hours in a high-stress, very active job, 9 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, with maybe a 20-minute break if I can fit it in, just barely enough to live in my studio apartment by myself. Story 34. In the Dakotas, there is a position where once every 6 months, you climb a ladder to change a light bulb. It's on top of a TV tower thousands of feet in the air, not great if you're afraid of heights, but it pays some $20,000 per climb. I imagine this would be a base jumper's dream job. Story 35. When I was backpacking, I signed up to a temp agency in Sydney who would hire well-presented front-of-house staff for corporate firms who like to have a pretty young, well-dressed thing manning the reception desk whilst their clients came. I often got paid $30 to $40 an hour to welcome clients, show them to their meeting room, pour some water and order their catering, and that's all I did, in fancy beautiful offices overlooking Sydney Harbour Bridge etc. Once their regular receptionist got back from leave, I'd be popped onto the next one. I did a stint at Sydney University at one of their newly built research centers. All I did was direct people to the lifts and the right part of the building for their meeting. I made enough money doing this to backpack through the entire east coast of Australia over 3 months. Story 36. I'm an admin at a state university. I'm new and do not affiliated as the country civil worker. I don't know the proper English term, so my salary is under minimum wage. However, other co-workers who are civil workers got paid 5 times bigger than me, plus tons of additional aid salary. Oh my ad, we have the same job desks. The job desks. Honestly, it's depend on the semester. On the beginning, middle and end of semester, it's real busy. Other than that, very slow days checking students' attendance, finishing report, or answering students' administrative questions. Heck, I saw my coworker who shared the same office room with me came to work at 8:30 to 9 and left at 1 p.m. Often she spent the days on the office pantry, cooking and gossiping. I understand why civil workers got bad reputation in my country, slacking off workers yet humongous salary. Sometimes I hate coming to this university for work because the salary is very unfair. We have the same job desks, yet vastly difference in salary. URGH. But, I'm still young, job is hard to find in this economy. At the very least, with the extra time I have, I'm able to spare time for graduate school, and in this university job, I'm able to build relations with professors experts in academia. Sorry for the long rant. Story 37. Not my experience across the board by any means, but I'm a paralegal, and I used to work for an attorney who literally expected me to do her entire job for her, and I would just hand her the finished product on her way into the courtroom so she could argue in front of the judge. I was getting paid $30K in salary, while she paid herself around $80K per year as an attorney, and she also collected rent on the building the law firm was in, so I guess owner of a small law firm. Story 38. Tenured university professor. My research professor during undergrad made $180K a year public university, so all salaries are in a publicly accessible database, and he taught a single entry-level organic chem course to undergrads for 3 50-minute weekly lectures and a specialized graduate course once a week, and managed 2 grad students who handled most of his office hours and grading papers. He was on campus 4 days a week for 6 or so hours at a time, and the majority of that was spent watching sports in his office. He did research through his grad students and published a paper every few years or so, but other than that he was clearly just resting on his laurels. Story 39. Housekeeper for the dead. I cleaned mausoleums and was paid $200 a day in 2002, so good money, working about 12 hours a day on average, and some days as little as 45 minutes. I was contracted and my own business, allowing me to write off so much stuff that I paid next to nothing in taxes. There might have been some questionably legal paperwork here, but we, occasionally, hiring friends for short stints, which made me very popular. This is how I worked my way through college. Story 40. Mobile notary that does home signings. They can line up 4 to 7 appointments in a day and make $200 to $300 per, one of the absolute best weekend gigs. In some markets you can pay your rent by working 1 extra Saturday a month. Story 41. My last job at Microsoft. My manager literally gave me nothing to do. I don't even know why I was there. In 6 months I did maybe 3 weeks work. For a while it was very pleasant, but eventually looking busy gets harder than actually being busy. Then a reorg happened and suddenly I had a competent manager who was wondering why I existed. No problem, I just had to go get an actual job before my review came up. All in all, a great year. Story 42. Some of the people, public and private sectors in this thread, lolling about how little work they have to do, when in reality there are other people being driven to an early grave by those people not doing their GD jobs, either because others' work is held up or made more difficult than necessary as a direct result. On the other hand, being really good at one's job and achieving the ability to produce significantly more than most does in fact result in lower effort that still produces outstanding results. Basically, get good enough at many jobs and the effort is reduced while still making a good living and not screwing over other people by not doing one's part. especially when the difference may be a customer who needlessly suffers, for example, in a healthcare setting. Story 43. I work at a heliport where I just get a couple passengers' bags, put them on the heli, and then go and sit on my phone for however many hours until the heli get back, rinse and repeat, roughly 70k. Story 44. Made 55 an hour supporting an American system. During graveyard hours, I was literally the only person in one of 3 huge buildings, all dark except for my lowly office. For the first few nights, security would come around to see why the light were on all night. I received no calls nor emails ever at any time. This lasted for 4 to 5 months. I slept most of the time, and of course, got myself banned from subreddits. Story 45. A lot of people look for low-effort jobs. What you want is a job you enjoy, that gives you a sense of purpose, then the effort becomes worth it. Text me if you find something like that, so I can join. Story 46. If you're young 18 and a student, check out security. We don't get paid over minimum wage and no prior experience with anything required. Allied Universal will literally hire anybody. If you're a student you can watch lectures, study, and do homework. If not, then you can just chill and watch YouTube or Netflix, or browse Reddit. I'm at work right now. Chillest job ever with 20-hour wages. Story 47. Ticket takers on a train. In my neck of the woods they get amazing pay, benefits, and OT opportunities to walk up and down the trains and punch scan tickets. And they still want more. Every few years there's a new scandal about overtime or disability fraud. It's ridiculous. Story 48. Work at the SEC. 135k a year, and all you have to do is watch Pornhub on taxpayer-funded computers while ignoring all the financial crimes of Wall Street. Story 49. Public school building engineers. 75k to change fluorescent light ballasts and call an electric ion or plumber or janitor when needed. No actual engineering skills or education required. It's just a title. You're a janitor that doesn't clean. Source: a bitter janitor who can't even get an interview for building engineer. Story 50. Work for the state I work in. Once a week we drive a company car to another site, replace a workstation or two, and then stay the night and check in on it the next day. Hit 40 hours early and 4-day weekend. Edit: thank you for all the upvotes. Just got done with a deployment and I work 2 hours tomorrow, then essentially a 4-day weekend again. Story 51. I did dedicated tech support in the late 90s. I worked the overnight shift. We each got an average of 6 calls a night, since most dedicated internet connections were owned by businesses and most businesses aren't doing much between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. The calls we got were invariably easy and my average call length was under 4 minutes. I actually worked less than a half hour a night. This is what would happen every call. The internet is down. Any other issue needs to speak to a different department. You'll tell them who to call and when. I ask the IP address of their router. About half of calls they don't know what I'm talking about. I tell them to have their network admin call. End of call. Half will know the IP. I do a trace route to their router. If I get there, the problem is not our connection. End of call. If I can't reach their IP, I look at where the trace ends. Unless it ends on a router with a specific kind of name less than 10 of the calls, I look up that router on a spreadsheet that tells which network engineer is responsible for that router. I email them the problem, tell the customer we are working on it, end of call. Sometimes the customer has ADSL. This was pretty uncommon, and there's more to those calls. I telnet into the router the trace stopped at, and flip the connection. This usually fixes the problem. If it doesn't, I email the engineer, end of call. I made 67k a year doing this. Adjusted for inflation, 110k, easiest job I ever had and the best paying. I was also single and living in an apartment that cost $265 a month, all bills paid, and drove a 10-year-old pickup. Now I make about 32k a year, pay $800 a month rent, and that doesn't include electricity. I also support a 15-year-old daughter. Story 52. Management. You're basically paid to make sure that other people are working. The higher you go, the more your job is to send emails like "keep up the good work, fam." Story 53. A long time ago, at the beginning of university, I did voiceover for that was in a different language. I usually showed up around midnight after the legit voiceover people had left for the day, did about 4 hours of work, and was paid 35 to 70 an hour. Most of it was just making different moaning sounds because apparently sexy moans sound different in different languages. I'm not surprised. TBH, I remember French class as a cat said something like meow instead of meow. Everyone was totally professional, and after a while it was just a job I did 2 to 4 nights a week that paid pretty well. I stopped because the studio was far away and the more intense school got the harder it was to manage a night schedule with classes. But honestly, if the chance came up, I'd probably do it again if I needed to save for a vacation or something. Story 54. I'd say every high salary job is a low effort one. It is a long-standing rule of capitalism that the harder, grueling, or unsatisfying is the job, the lower is the pay, rarely ever even a salary position. Story 55. If you can create the right software as a service business, it's basically free money. I licensed out a software I wrote to 2 large franchises and basically get paid 15k a month to stay home and ensure it's running 247. Story 56. CBP officer. Once you're off the line, you can browse Reddit and YouTube all day for 100 KYR base. Have friends in other gov jobs, and I hear the same from them. Story 57. Federal prison guards. I was at a federal prison camp, i.e. minimum security. Most of the guards made north of 100k and the inmates did 99 of the work. Many guards literally slept at their posts. Story 58. Sorry I have to say, but thank God for coronavirus. I'm in finance and I don't do now that everything is remote and is staying remote. At most I work about 2 to 4 hours each day, and then I got bored and picked up a second full-time remote finance job. I'm making close to 200K now, doing about 4 to 7 hours of work each day, not including any overtime, full-time remote. Story 59. I work maybe 15 hours a week most weeks and get paid 125K with unlimited PTO, insurance premiums paid, and a 45401K match. What hours I do work are almost zero effort or difficult tasks. The secret is that after 7 years of working in a niche high-turnover field, I'm the most knowledgeable person, and they wanted to retain me to help and train others that turn over every 2 to 3 years on average. Because of this turnover rate, almost no one makes it to the experience level required to replace me. I have so much free time that I bought a 25 share of a small manufacturing business, started managing ordering and shipping if most of the products about 2 hours a week, and make an additional 45K a year at that. I probably play more Minecraft than actual work recently. Story 60. Dentists, orthodontists are highly skilled workers, but the total amount of work that they do is low, and most of it is low stress. I have family members who are orthodontists and they work 4 days a week. That would be my answer. Story 61. I work in marketing, and honestly my job is just telling people with suggestions. We will take that under consideration, and the other half is listening to higher-ups saying how we can change our brand, and absolutely nothing happens ever. Due to COVID I have been working from home and get to Reddit all day every day because work decided to block it. Story 62. So I'm seeing a lot of PPL say government jobs. If all y'all are on Reddit, no wonder why it takes forever to get anything done. SMH. How do I go about getting a job in Gov? Story 63. Digital marketing. There is huge demand, very low requirements for entry. Jobs are now usually remote and the career progression is fantastic. Anyone with a gaming mindset can do well in this field. Story 64. I people being paid way too much for doing 15 minutes of work while there are literally thousands in poverty. Our economic infrastructure is a joke. Story 65. May not be popular, but every programmer friend of mine works an hour or 2 a day and is making almost triple figures. Plays games all day, responds to a bug or project every few hours. I picked the wrong career field. Story 66. Overhead power linemen. Bunch of dumb on poles who think they are serving all of humanity by getting absolutely faced and doing coke on weekends, only to show up to work to drive a bucket truck Monday to Friday, doing the easiest part of any job in the distribution and transmission system. Story 67. Another vote for IT, with an asterisk. If you play it right you can get a lifetime position with great salary and benefits and easy work that you presumably enjoy. Alternately you can end up a help desk drone making minimum wage and hating life. SLG. State, local government, educational institutions, as others have mentioned, and the occasional unicorn privately owned niche company are great places to target. Don't get entrenched. Story 68. It's near impossible to get some of the lazy AF teachers at my school fired because of the ridiculously powerful union. Several SOBs are making well over $120,000 doing jack all day. To be clear, I'm also a teacher. Our union is too powerful. Shitty teachers need to be able to be fired. Also, I'm in NYC. Story 69. A lot of work from home call center jobs offer pretty high wages, and all you have to do is answer a couple dozen calls from your desk. Best job I've ever had. Story 70. I work as an escalations and project engineer at a small MSP. Coming from a large big name MSP, the difference is, while the joke is I only have to work 3 hours a day and get paid 6 figures. And even then, the 3 hours is optional for my position. Story 71. Worked where school tables are made. My work was to fit together main metal structure and the plastic bottom of the table's legs. Just one hammer hit per table leg, during the night, without a huge prod to do. 1,800 for 2 weeks I worked there. Story 72. Exam proctoring. You can find listing for test proctors all over the internet. They usually pay anywhere between 15 to 22 hours, and all you do is sit for a few hours and watch people take tests. Story 73. Install Infinite or mod. Start mining and just go to sleep. You'll have 1,000 gold or pieces in the middle of the night. Craft the out of the rings and get your smithing to 103 times in a row. If you go with iron, it's also helping with alteration skill. Story 74. Half of these comments are jobs where literally one person on earth actually does it, and the other 49 are just complaining about politicians and executives. Story 75. I'm quite discomforted by how little money I made working late night bars for years compared to what I do now. Producing videos for a tech company, there needs to be serious minimum wage reform because it's disproportionate as. Story 76. Enterprise SaaS sales. Amazing job, manage your own workload schedule, stellar benefits, expense cards, infinite job security and great people. Typically pays 300K per year. 200K is considered the low end. A lot of people are scared off by the sales aspect of it, but selling to technology to large businesses isn't very salesly at all. Story 77. Art collecting trading. If you can collect enough to begin with, and you know what you're doing, it's very simple to buy great artists early, wait for prices to rise, sell a bunch at auction, which is very low effort, then reinvest the money and do it all again. You can spend some profits while making more. I know a guy that does this where he can raise almost $1 million just like that. Story 78. The women who hold the stop-slow signs on construction sites mining big projects. We constantly see news stories in my city Sydney, Australia, about them earning six figures. Story 79. I work as an English language instructor. Basically I teach English to non-English speakers, so most if not all classes consist of only spoken English and some grammar work. Hey Race, the funny thing, I completely forgot everything about grammar and still don't know. Yesterday I had to look up examples on third-person singular because I forget what that was. My job consists of reading notes I wrote for myself during my online classes. I reached a point where I wrote a script for myself, so I pretend that I know what I'm doing in class. LOL. I read those notes 90 of the time in class. The pay is quite good and the overtime pay is insane. I had to double-check my contact for it as the overtime is more than my own base salary. To put it in perspective, 3 months' worth of overtime allowed me to pay for my brother's MA degree fully, and the overtime is calculated differently in this job. So normal working hours would be only 4 hours per day, overtime would be another 4 hours of teaching, which adds up to 8 hours per day, and that would be the normal working hours. I give my students a lot of breaks, so I'm technically teaching 6 to 7 hours only. Haha, I've taken on so many classes per day because all I get to do is sit at home and read my notes to my students on Zoom. Plus I made it so that it's 80 them doing language practices with themselves, so I don't do any work. I also scroll through Reddit or play video games in the background. So far no one can tell. Also, as horrible and lazy as I sound, the notes and lessons that I wrote are actually quite effective. I actually spent a lot of time developing them and making them good so that I don't have to bother much with my supervisor. For some reason I also got a raise today. I'm really starting to question my job. Edit for the people asking where and how. I'm not comfortable saying the name of the company, but it's a language center that starts with the letter B. As for how, hey Race the thing, it's a little bit tricky. So in this company, the way they pay their employees is based on how many classes they teach per month. However, due to the labor laws in my country, that's illegal. All employees must have a fixed base salary, so it's different from one country to another based on labor laws. So combine the fact that this company has to pay me a minimum salary with their system of paying me per class results into me getting paid more. Now why would they do that? Why not stick to the minimum and call it a day? Because of their own rules of paying per class it's called units, but it'll stick with classes, it's easier. So in my contract it says that I should get paid a minimum salary due to labor laws. So the company said okay sure, we'll just calculate it into the same way we do things and give this person X amount of classes that translates into his base salary. However, what they didn't calculate is the lack of time we have to finish the classes and the massive amount of material that we need to cover every month, plus the fact that we're understaffed. All of this translates into me reaching my minimum amount of classes in just a week and a half, and then for the remaining 2 weeks and a half, all the work I'm doing is considered as overtime, thus paying me more. Their system is so broken. Story 80. Posting for moons in cryptocurrency. I lived in Salt Lake City in 2002 during the Winter Olympics. Was a sophomore in college, but the school closed down that semester to host the games. Was getting paid $20 very good at the time to sit in a van in traffic for a good part of the day so I could swap out tablecloths in the private dining rooms of big corporate clients. Schedule was all over the place, but the money was great considering how little work I actually did. Story 81. I work at a bulge bracket investment bank. I don't want to give out too many details, but I get about 2 to 5 emails a day that I essentially forward to other people to answer the questions. I get paid $100K.